So welcome to the Node.js TSC meeting for June the 29th. In attendance, we have myself, Michael Dawson. We have James Snell, Brian Hughes, and Anna Henningsen. We have our standard agenda, so we can start out with that. Things that were tagged TSC agenda and TSC review for awareness. And so I think we'll just go through that list. The first one is meeting frequency discussion. So there's been some discussion on that. Let me just see the latest. That is issue 286. So I'm just opening that up. I think we've added in there a discussion as well in terms of alternating times. So I see it sounds like there's no opposition to moving to a monthly schedule. James and Brian have both commented on that. I don't know, Anna, if you have any input on that front.
I don't think so. Like the current time slot does work pretty well for me, and I'm not sure. I think the person who has spoken up the most when it comes to switching time slots is Ben, because it is kind of late for Europe right now. But neither of the proposals would help a lot with that. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was Ben Norhaus, but he's dropped off.
Oh right, yeah, right. He dropped.
So there's two things. The first thing was whether we go monthly instead of every 2 weeks. And then separate from that was changing the time. So in terms of going to do it monthly instead of every 2 weeks, does that sound reasonable to you, or?
Yeah, I like the idea too.
I mean, it seems reasonable. In terms of the frequency of us getting together, we've canceled enough. The only thing I guess it means is that if we do cancel, we'll probably have to make a bigger effort to reschedule as opposed to just canceling. But seems totally fine to me too.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work out, we can always revisit, right?
Yeah, true. Okay. So I think based on discussion here, I'd say we basically post into the issue that unless there's objections, we're going to move to that. Anybody object to that approach? Nope. Okay, so unless we hear objections in the next week, we are going to move to monthly. Okay, so based on discussion in last meeting. Okay. The other issue was if we should rotate the times, and yeah, it was Ben who was asking for that. I did look at the CTC availability schedule, and it is a challenge based on that for a few people like Rod. And the 22 UTC would be better for a subset of the people. It would also be not as good for a bunch of people. So 20 is the best for the largest group of people, but I'm not sure that we should necessarily say it's just too bad for other people like Rod, right? So that was my suggestion of, the 22 or 0 as an alternative.
I also know Shigeki hasn't been involved in a while, and we haven't heard why specifically, but
right.
It's I think it's a likely reason.
I think I honestly think that he's coming up against the participation guideline. To be honest. Right. So what I'm thinking is maybe I should put a comment in there that says that Node.js TSC. Can those of you for which the current time is a challenge, please speak up? Otherwise, if people don't speak up to that, then I think, maybe they're not active enough for us to factor that in, right?
Yeah, I think
and there are people on the TSC I don't know, Fedor or Shieki, who are also on the CTC, and whose attendance hasn't really changed since we introduced changing time slots. So yeah.
Okay, when we do that, so I'm just existing regular attendees. So here's I said Node.js TSC. Can those of you for which the current time is a challenge please comment? We'd like to consider if we need to move, but we need to know if it's going to make a difference before we do that, as it will affect attendance of some of the existing regular attendees. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll basically agree to move to monthly, and then we'll see if people speak up. I think if they don't speak up, then that's a sign of of attendance, participation, like James was saying, and we can take the right action based on that. Okay, so the next issue is request additional travel fund allocation. So I know, James, you had an update on that.
Yeah. So this it came up on the board meeting on Tuesday. The current status of it is basically that we are going to be putting a bit more work into the request because the ComCom is also putting in a travel allocation fund request. But there's some question over how those interrelate with one another and how those possibly interact. So one of the possible proposals is that we would just do a combined fund for both the ComCom and the TSC, and we'd work out a process for having both groups administrate that, so that it'll just make things easier on the board side for looking at those requests and approving the allocations.
Right.
A little bit easier on budgeting, that kind of thing. The other side of it is it would make it easier for those of us reviewing the request, because we won't have to sit there and ask the question, is this a ComCom thing or is this a TSC thing? It's just one bucket that's pulled from. So that's where that stands. We're going to try to resolve it through email over the coming couple of weeks, so we can try to have the resolution approved by the next face-to-face meeting, which is in end of that.
Sorry, you have it resolved by when? I just was typing, didn't quite hear that.
Node Summit, the meeting that's at Node Summit at the end of July.
I'd be resolved by the VM Summit, have it resolved in time for the VM Summit at Node.
Yeah, there's going to be a Foundation Board meeting at Node Summit. So.
Okay, in time for the board meeting at Node Summit. Okay, sounds good. And I haven't forgotten the ComCom move one. I'm just going through some of the easier, shorter ones, hopefully first.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. By the way, on the travel fund, I know there was also some discussion of the wording of the current travel fund and who is eligible for that.
Yes.
Do you have any more insight on that or any updates?
Yeah, it's basically comes down to the travel fund rules say that the people getting the funds, receiving the funds, are supposed to be individual members of the foundation, and we have not been verifying that. So basically going forward, what we need to do is when somebody asks, for fund reimbursements, we need them to certify that they are, in fact, individual members. We have no way of verifying that because we do not have access to the member database. That's considered confidential at the board level. So basically what will happen is they certify to us that they are, we pass that on to the foundation for actually doing the reimbursement, and they will verify before they pay out. We just need to make sure that in that document that we have in the TSC repo, when somebody submits a PR, that there's a column there for, yes, I am a individual member.
Right. Yeah. Make sure, I guess they really, as long as the requester knows that's a requirement, they're the ones who'll be most impacted. So.
Right.
And also based on the wording, since you need to be an individual member, as opposed to being a member of the TSC or something that falls under the umbrella, it's kind of already structured to cover ComCom. Like we don't have to restructure the fund, just how we administer it, which I think is kind of nice.
I just to confirm, like the code to let people become individual members covers more than just collaborators and core.
So the code that we have, there is a specific code for collaborators that can be used by collaborators, and you're supposed to be a collaborator in order to use it. That code has not been working, so they've been looking into making sure that it does work. And then anyone else can become an individual member. So the travel fund, right, is not necessarily limited to just collaborators. They're whoever the TSC or the ComCom feels should get that reimbursement for whatever reasons. If we want to get somebody to a conference, we want to get somebody to the Collab Summit, that kind of thing. But the restriction is that they at least have to be individual members.
Right. So I get
put additional requirements on there that's our, we have the ability to do that.
Right. I sort of get that part. I was just validating that when you say collaborators, it's not limited to core collaborators. It, anybody, say you're a collaborator in ComCom, can you use that and get a free membership, right?
As far as I know, yeah, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah, in practice, my understanding is it's anyone who has access to, was it the members repo, I think, whatever that private repo is that has the code in it, which is anyone who's a member of any working group anywhere in the org.
Right. Okay. Okay. Good. Just wanted to validate that. So basically, I'm saying in the minutes, membership is free for collaborators of the project, right? So as long as you're an active collaborator, it's not like we're asking people to pay money. Okay. Anything more on that front? No. Copyright date? Any update on that front?
Nope. I'm going to put that on the agenda for the next meeting, so we can do. I need to reach out and talk to the legal committee first and figure out what we're at. I haven't had that talk.
Okay, clarify which people should be org owners. I don't know if there's anything more to say on that front. At this time, let me just open up and see if there's any discussion there. Right, I think we haven't closed this one just because we're thinking about what we should do on that front, but we're not really making any progress. I don't know if we should leave it on the TSC. I guess we may forget it completely if we don't get a reminder, but what do you guys think?
I think it might be helpful to perhaps reframe the question a bit. I think there's another question that sort of undergirds the discussion, and that is, should we have a formal policy of who is an org owner versus who is not? Does that need to be a documented thing, or are we okay with using our best judgment, which is kind of what we do right now? I'm not actually sure what the answer is to that, but I think maybe we should come up with an answer to that first. And then, if the answer to that is yes, we should have a formal policy, then we can kind of go do this detailed exercise. But I feel like this discussion so far has sort of gotten tripped up a bit in that question.
Right, okay.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, just one question. Right now it's mostly CTC people who are org owners, I think. And is the ComCom gonna need to have org owners for any reason?
Yeah, I think so. Because there's going to be cases, for instance, as right now we have the overlap where Brian is on the TSC and is the ComCom chair. So in that case, it's kind of up in the air. But if somebody is elected the ComCom chair who is not on the TSC, that person still should have the ability to add members or do administrative tasks that affect the ComCom repos.
In fact, there was already an issue in the ComCom, I think, around that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just having that discussion. And yeah, the idea is, at least for now, just add me. Yeah, I mean, it probably doesn't need to be many people. I don't see ComCom needing to have those permissions nearly as often as the CTC does. I could be wrong, but that's kind of like my impression so far.
Yeah.
So like I'm kind of okay with just taking this slow and not really worrying about that too much yet.
Yeah, I think I like your idea of having the discussion on, do we even need to formalize it or just do the right thing for the short term? Because it's...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be so infrequent that we add people that, you know, it may not be worth the effort to formalize it.
Okay, so I'll take the action to open an issue that forms it. So basically, and we'll create that one. We'll remove this current issue from TSC review, from our TSC agenda, and then we'll let the other one first go through the regular people commenting, and if we need to, put it on the TSC review or an agenda as appropriate. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so then I would go back to, let's see, actually, I'm going to go back to the issue here to see. I think I had two lists of things. There was... Right, okay, the rest are TS3 reviews. Okay, so let's circle back. So the next one was the issue 270. So request to move moderation responsibilities to ComCom. Brian had mentioned that, you know, there's sort of two things going on here. James had a PR which was sort of addressing the same area, and then there's the request. So maybe we can have a good conversation around that to figure out the way forward on those fronts. So Brian, you want to take that away?
Yes, I mean, this is something I think we've known for a while, that we need to continue to beef up our moderation, especially like our moderation guidelines. You know, we have some gaps in that. And so this has become a question of like, what's the best way to make sure that work gets done? The TSC has not historically been a particularly great place to get that done. Probably just, you know, as we all know, we've been struggling just to get people to participate. So, you know, it's just kind of a matter of like, people aren't really available to do that in the TSC. We do have people who are able to do that in ComCom, and we have people who have the expertise to do it there. But given that, you know, how much this affects the entire org, I'm starting to agree that like completely moving it to ComCom is not the right approach. And something you had, James, in your PR was to share that responsibility jointly. And so I really like that idea. And I think it's just a matter of figuring out like, how do we get the right voices in the room, like for that PR and things like that, to get it fleshed out. And also to make sure that we can actually get this stuff, you know, passed and moved through.
Well, I'm thinking that at this point we need to just move to a are there no objections model. So we put together the proposal. If anybody objects to it, then we deal with it. But that's not. If there are no objections, then we shouldn't have to take it to a vote. We propose that we have a joint team. That team is responsible for it, for taking those actions. And that team is, you know, required to have a report available for both the TSC and ComCom and what those actions are, and then figure out some escalation policy. So once we have that basic framework in place, I think we just say, are there any objections? If there are no objections, it just becomes the policy.
Well, I guess, Brian, in terms of the PR that James has now, is there anything that needs to be updated in that from your perspective?
I need to take a look again. I seem to recall that there was some stuff, and I had some thoughts on it as well. At one point in time, I was like, oh, I should mention that, and of course, I completely forgot to do that, and don't remember what those comments are. But I do need to take a look again. I do think it's a little more work. One thing that might be helpful, I'm curious what you think, is maybe we could take that PR and split it into a couple of pieces. Maybe the first one would be more of just like the lateral reorg move to say that moderation responsibilities are ultimately fall to the TSC and ComCom instead of just TSC. That way, whenever it comes time to land these changes, you know, ComCom would be brought to the discussion. We can have, you know, more voices involved that actually have like a voting stake. I don't know, does that make sense? Do you think that might be helpful? Or is that like over-engineering the process? And I'm not really sure.
I mean, we can split it up. The risk of that is the conversation becoming fragmented and taking longer for us to get things sorted out. I'd prefer not to split it up, but if we need to, we need to.
I mean, I guess is there a barrier to the people from commenting on the existing PR and getting, like, it seems like we have something which is a pretty concrete proposal. If we basically, say this looks good, or no, we want these specific changes, that's a good way to move forward. And I don't know that there's any, like, moving the responsibility doesn't need to happen for people from ComCom to share their views, right?
Yeah, that is true. That is a good point. I'm wondering if, since this would be sort of like asking for outside help, if there's not going to be much of a sense of ownership, that would be an impediment. But I don't know. I actually might just be making a mountain out of a molehill there. I'll take a look at that PR again, and we can also go ahead and tag, at Node.js/community committee, and just get people to take a look.
Yeah, I think if you sort of, if it was tagged that way and said, hey, look, this makes it a shared responsibility, so we need to comment, come take a look, and
Yeah, the biggest thing, we need people to actually pay attention to the conversation and participate.
So I think, like, the minutes I've taken here is that, so Brian, the next step is you're going to make suggestions on the PR from James as the next step, and they could be like, specific point changes, or if you look at it and say, well, no, really, we should break it up into 3, you can make those comments as well, right?
Yeah, and I think it also probably makes sense to go and tag it as a CC agenda, and then we could discuss it in the next ComCom meeting, just to make sure that, while we kind of have a captive audience, we can be like, hey, go check this thing out.
Sure. Let's see. That is 250, right? No, that's 270. Sorry. There's no time like the present. I'm opening it, or trying to open it. Not 250. No, sorry, it's 270. I did have the right one. Okay, sorry about that. So 270, I'm going to tag it as CC agenda, done.
Actually, thinking about it, I will do this, but we can go ahead and close 270. I think we can let the PR that's open,
right.
which
right.
Number 276, we can let that like supersede it.
James, yeah. Which issue is that?
It's pull request number 276.
Okay, so I'm going to go to, and that's the one I actually meant to tag. So. Okay, so tagged 276. Okay, and if you want to close the other one, I'll let you do that as the opener. Brian. Okay, sounds good. We got our next way forward. Next thing on the agenda then is there's sort of 2, which we can cover in the same area. There's like the candidate areas for TSC and Community Committee sort of coverage that I'd opened 278, as well as James has 109 for regular roll-up reporting for active working groups. And I think we can kind of discuss those as overlapping concepts. So the first thing I kind of wanted to discuss is, like, if people taking a look at those areas think that they, reflect things we should be trying to keep on top of, and like just the whole idea of trying to at least have a bit of a handle on these makes sense to people. As a sort of the no-go, yes-go, like there's interest to push forward and figure out next steps on this, or, well, we don't think it's a good idea, so we won't do anything kind of thing.
So, like, as I was mentioning before, I think this is a really good idea. Just because, like, there's so many moving projects, it's easy to
quite a bit of an echo.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brian, maybe you can say that again, because I think James said there was a bit of an echo when you did that.
All right, is it better now? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so sometimes my mic, because it's not a headset mic, I get some weird like echo sometimes. Yeah, so I was saying, like, just since like the foundation is so big, and especially since we now have 2 top-level committees, that there's so many areas it's easy for stuff to fall between the cracks. So I think it's a good idea to at least have this listed out, something we can kind of keep in the back of our heads. Just as being on these top-level committees, it is kind of up to us to make sure that all the areas are being worked on, or at least that we're aware when something isn't being worked on. So
yeah, and I'd almost be looking for like volunteers from the TSC to say, well, okay, I'm going to go cover these particular areas, right? So that we, in some cases, it makes sense to go back to the working groups to say, hey, build working group, can we maybe, I don't know whether we want to ask for an update of problems or issues, or I don't know that we want to put a bigger burden on the working groups, but figure out what the right model is for those ones. In other cases, though, there may just not be anybody, so in that case, we might need a volunteer from the TSC group or maybe the CTC group. I'm not sure what the right group is to sort of say, well, okay, I'll update the TSC group here as took a quick look at it. Looks like we have a big problem, or everything looks good. And, we can maybe go through and sort of review them on a periodic basis. I don't know whether it's, I don't know that we want to go through them all, but we could every meeting, well, certainly don't want to do it every meeting, but you could say like for each meeting, we would go through some subset and spread it out over the year or something like that. I don't know, James, you have any thoughts on that front?
Sorry, I was on mute. Nothing, nothing specific or concrete.
Okay, Anna, how about you? Like, any thoughts? Good idea, bad idea?
I don't think I have any more to say than James. Sorry.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
I'm just thinking like, what would next steps be? It's sort of like, if people are interested in being involved, then we can come up with next steps. But if there's not enough interest, it's hard to say that how we would do something, right?
Yeah, this kind of touches on this sort of existential problem we've always had of, we're an open source community when we rely on volunteers, and what do we do when no one volunteers? And I still have no answer to this whatsoever, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like people are gonna, like most people are going to do whatever they think is most important anyways, right? Like, except for maybe those who get paid to work on Node, but that's like a handful, so.
Right, but so for example, there's our recent issues around, say, the Mac in the build work, right? We didn't have enough Macs, right? So should the TSC have any role in trying to help resolve that, or just, say, okay, it'll get resolved on its own in the build work group? Same with, like, we have OpenSSL, which is going to version 1.2. Should we just hope that the things work out and we upgrade at the right times, or should we be proactive in a way to try and have a story, understand what's going on? I know exactly what everybody's saying, right? Like, it's not like we can tell anybody to do anything, but is there any value in sort of highlighting things that we think are risks and exposures, and that the project would like somebody to step up and even take leadership? Sort of, is there value in highlighting those things, so that if somebody is looking for something different, or doesn't have their own opinion on what's most important, they might choose that versus something else?
Yeah, I definitely think there's value in that. I mean, especially if we had it like as part of onboarding, it could help people to understand like these are all different parts a thought I just had too is this could also be useful to bring to the board. Where, you know, we can highlight like these are all the different areas. These are the parts that are currently underfunded. And who knows, maybe we might realize that there's one area where we're just not going to get volunteers because of the type of work. And maybe it makes sense to go and try and hire someone. I think like maybe translations, like if we can't get anyone to do translations to a couple of languages we care about, yeah, I don't know, hypothetical, but I could definitely see the board being interested in that information too. At least I hope they would be interested in it.
Right. Yeah, I think we, like in that case, we still need somebody who's going to step up and say, hey, I'm interested enough in translations that I'm going to take a look at it and say, this is where we're okay and not okay. But then, you know, if there is somebody who does that amount of work, you know, that then gives the TSC some information to be able to say, well, okay, what are all the things we could do to support that effort? You know, whether it's a, you know, media, hey, this is an area where we're looking for more people to get interested to like you said, you know, maybe funding comes into it in some way. You know, maybe the answer is you contract out translations, and, you know, as long as we have somebody who's sort of willing to coordinate it, you know, they can get help through that mechanism. You know, it's probably different for everyone. It's sort of about having enough inside information to be able to provide some sort of support to, you know, if there's nobody looking at it, nobody interested, then there's nothing we're going to be able to do. But if we can either highlight it so we can get somebody interested, or support people who are interested, but, you know, obviously can't do the whole thing by themselves, that's where I'm thinking there's value. It's just a matter of how you get there, right?
Yeah.
Because today our meetings are kind of like, you know, we talk about today's problems, and we resolve conflicts, but it's how do we do a little bit of the forward thinking or bigger picture stuff.
I don't know. Typically, you know, when it comes to bigger picture stuff that's all on the technical side, I would look to the CTC, or I would look to the TSC.
Right, so that's part of the feedback I was looking here. Like, should I be having this conversation in the CTC group to say, hey, should we be doing something like this? Like, our CTC meetings have all been canceled because, yeah, it's good news that we don't have any, you know, conflicts to resolve. But could we use some of the cycles there to talk about, you know, any of these areas and things we want to support or emphasize or de-emphasize, that kind of stuff?
So, like, I personally am a fan of not having the CTC do that kind of work, because, like, the CTC's purpose is to be there for conflict resolution and things that cannot be handled by the collaborator group as a whole. And so, like, for the more for the roadmap kind of stuff, I would prefer to to leave that to the larger collaborator group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So the other approach would be to say you could try and form a working group that takes on this type of work as well. Like, I agree, we don't necessarily want to limit it to a smaller subset, right? Just trying to think how we can get and find the people who would be interested, capable to contribute. You know, as long as if I'm the only one who thinks it's useful, and everybody else says, no, that's a silly idea, then, you know, there's no point, right? So it
is not a silly idea. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. It's just hard. It's just one of those things that needs to be. It's difficult to come up with a great answer for.
Right. So it's like, what's you know, can we bite off any small piece that helps move in the, you know, the whole thing, figuring out how to get coverage and all this, like, okay, it's a huge problem. Is there anything concrete we can think of that would be, you know, like if we got a list here, you know, if we just, you know, tried to get a discussion, I don't know, if we had tried to get a discussion going on and walk through the list to say, okay, do we think, our current state of affairs is good on releases? We're all happy, nothing to worry about there. Build, test, documentation, is that?
You're talking about the list in the issue in 278, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that I don't know if that's the right list, but that's the one I started with in terms of all the different things that, potentially are risks or we might want to support. Dependencies is an example where, we had issues where JIP is going away. And I don't know that we have a plan for that, right? OpenSSL 1.2, I think there's sort of a plan there, but, at one point, Miles was suggesting we should be a bit more proactive about what goes on that front. So I think that, it's just a good example where the dependencies will have some things that it's worth us, as a project, knowing the direction forward on those or where there's a risk. And
I think it's just going to come down to something we got to give some more thought to. Why don't we keep it on the agenda for our next meeting and revisit?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable if people can sort of chime in and discuss it. I mean, we could try, I don't know, in terms of, so there's two issues. There's that issue and the issue about getting a regular reporting from the working groups. Yeah. Is that something, should we be asking some of the working groups to come to a meeting and ask for a report? Or, because I think that's what the scope was in there originally, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of related. I mean, it's a tangible thing. Do you still think that's a good idea, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something we absolutely need to do.
So that may be a concrete first step, is to say, okay, let's go to the working groups and say, can we, get some coverage in terms of those existing working groups coming and saying, this is where we think we're at, this is where we could use some help, or where we couldn't use some help, that kind of stuff. So what we could then do is, can some of us volunteer to go and talk to those working groups to ask them to come, right? We could split it up across some of the working groups.
Yeah.
I'm happy to volunteer so I can volunteer for a few. Like, there's a few I can probably do the updates myself. So maybe you take it back to GitHub. We can volunteer each, try and volunteer there to talk to some of the working groups. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm also thinking I'll go and tag this as a CC agenda, and basically we can repeat this for ComCom. Since, well, I mean, technically we don't have any working groups right now, but we do. There are a couple of areas that looks like evangelism is going to be going over pretty soon.
Yeah, exactly. So if that list is covered by CC, the ComCom, then yeah, I think that's a good idea. So.
Yeah, because we can focus more on making sure like the areas that aren't really core technical areas are still represented and covered.
Okay. Just taking a few notes here. Back to GitHub, TSC members, to contact. Okay, sorry, I'm going to. Sorry. Concepts. Okay. Sorry, just one more line. Okay, so any other issues before we go to the phones or lines to see if there's any questions? No? Okay, so I think people, if anybody is watching on the YouTube stream, and I see there's 6 viewers, if you want to ask a question, you could post it in the issue for the meeting itself. And I'll just flip over to IRC. You could also post a question in IRC Dev. And we'll just give a few minutes for people to do that. Don't see any questions yet, but we'll just wait another minute or two. Okay, I'm just going to refresh the issue. Still don't see anything there. Don't see anything on that Node Dev, so I think we can assume there's no questions. So I think that's it for this time.
Okay.
And I'll update the meeting schedule to be 1 month from today. Thanks.
Right. One more thing. 1 month from today, James said that I think that was exactly when the Node Summit was happening.
Yeah, that would make sense. 26.
It's the last week in July, so yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll take a look at that
a week
earlier or later.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, because I'm going to be there as well, and I think there'll be enough people. We should just do it a different time. Okay.
Maybe a week earlier than that. So.
Okay, thanks. Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.